As many people know at this point, this series has kind of been about interviewing artists as they're modeling something and kind of talking about their Patreons and the art that they're currently producing. This is going to be a little bit different. This will be the first time that I'm talking to an artist who is currently working on a Kickstarter project, which is a little bit different. I'm really excited to kind of get into the details of that. And I'm excited to be talking about this amazing Kickstarter project between Michael Clute and I guess it'd be Nickey's Hatchery is his like official moniker, right?
Yeah, yeah. So it's Nickey Dimchev. I know I just mutilated his last name, poor guy. But yeah, Nickey of Nickey's Hatchery.
Yes, awesome. And I'm super excited about it. Current Kickstarter is looking amazing, and is it live currently?
Yeah, so it launched on June. It was the sixth day of the sixth month, and it was the sixth hour.
Of course it was. That's amazing. I didn't even realize, but that's so cool.
Let's see. So yeah, I'm sorry. No, it wasn't the sixth month. We missed it. We wanted to do June, but it was it was July 6th. My apologies. I forgot.
That's okay.
It was July 6th, but it was the sixth day of the month on the sixth hour and the sixth minute. I think. I don't know. I tried to fit 3 6s in there somehow.
I mean, yeah, you still got it in the end. That works. So I guess that's a good segue. This Kickstarter is mostly focusing on Infernals, right?
Correct. Yeah, those that are born with infernal blood.
Nice.
So if anybody feels like they would like to sample some of this, some of the infernals that we've got for this Kickstarter, if you go to epicadventureminiatures.com and if you scroll down here and sign up for our newsletter, just put in your name and your email. You'll get access to these two miniature files. We have them supported and unsupported.
Oh, that's awesome. And they are beautiful.
So one of them, the monk, was designed by me, sculpted by Nickey, and then adjusted by me. And then the warlock was designed and sculpted by me.
Nice.
And these are exclusive to just kind of like the test run. So they're a little bit different than the ones that you would get from the actual Kickstarter release. The monk actually has this cool like Hellboy epic. There you go, right here. This cool like stone gauntlet with the flames.
Oh,
and
man.
Then the warlock actually just some of them. Let's see if we can go back here.
These are
Warlock.
beautiful.
Thanks. Warlock has like some skull type stuff instead of just the basic little shield on her belt and her knees and stuff like that. Yeah, it's this particular project. I know both Nickey and I have been in the community sculpting for quite a while. But we certainly tried to push ourselves both on the design and the sculpting level when we started producing these, and it's been a pretty amazing collaboration between the two of us because we definitely have we're interested in very similar artists as inspiration, but when we go about our own sculpts, Nickey is a little more prone to simple, clean designs. He's very into anime, and I'm into like just if there's an empty space, let's throw a belt or a knife or something dangly there.
Okay.
So I'm a bit more cluttered, and it comes from my interest in Wayne Reynolds' art of Pathfinder fame.
Okay.
So I like to really kind of to throw in as much equipment as I can in there to show story, to give a little essence of the characters, the world itself. It's part of world building, and it's definitely helped. Like I said, it's finding that happy medium place that I think we both tend to be on opposite sides of that are, and it's not that we dislike one or the other. I think it's just a tendency that we do from our own artistic approach to things, and it's been super beneficial for us to kind of work together on that because since I'm doing all the concept art. I can start there, and then that's like our first introduction to it in terms of the flow and the process of a collaboration like this. It takes far less time sometimes to do a concept design or 2D concept illustration than it is to go ahead and sculpt it. Nickey's so darn fast though that sometimes I'll be working on a concept and he's already halfway through his sculpt.
Yeah, I've had the pleasure of jumping in because the time difference. I usually can't stay long, but I'll jump in real early in the morning for me to check out some of his live streams where he does sculpting, and it's crazy. I get sucked in with just a second watching him create these amazing models in just a few minutes.
Absolutely. But yeah, it's so far the project has been pretty amazing. And it's been eye-opening. I know I had somebody ask me, why are you doing a Kickstarter? I think we've been doing Patreon for a while, and the short answer is just that it's a matter of time. When I first opened up my Patreon back in April of 2020, was it? Yeah. My intention was to go through the player's handbook at D&D and then just do a male and a female for every single class and heritage that they offer, and then start moving into expanded races and expanded classes and things that just kind of gathered my interest, and then start diving into different I would say either themes or different genres in different settings. But along the way, it just, there's just not enough time for an independent artist who's working a full-time job to come in and do that much sculpting to any degree of quality that would be worthy of downloading. So let alone pay for. So I started talking to Nickey a while back, and the cool thing about this community is a lot of the independent artists, we talk to each other. We geek out over the stuff that each other does. So we get close pretty quick, and we have a lot of similar experiences when it comes to some of our challenges and what we're trying to accomplish. And Nickey really liked what my overall vision for Epic Adventure Miniatures was. It was very much in line with what he wants to do with and has done with Nickey's Hatchery.
Yeah.
So it just seemed like a ripe opportunity to try and collaborate and put something that we could we could invest the appropriate amount of time towards developing. And so we quickly started going down a rabbit hole in terms of what project to go ahead and do. And the initial project that I pitched to him was this project called Assault on Ironhold. And it was like an old school dungeon crawl, but with a really cool twist on it. And we were wanting to do a heavily stylized, almost like a Darksiders Battle Chasers dual motor era proportioned, heroic, cool-looking design spin on it, and and that turned into a litany of different things like spin-offs, a lot of content that we wanted to approach on it. And before we knew it, the project had grown well outside of the scale of a first project on Kickstarter, or our first Kickstarter campaign. So we decided to kind of put that one on the back burner and build up to it. And so then we started, I told him about my idea about going into the player's handbook and doing each class and race. And he was like, yeah, that sounds cool, but I'm tired of elves, and everybody's got an elf, everybody's got an orc or goblin or something like that, or dwarves. What if we do something different? And back in October, I started working on tieflings, and I thought, wouldn't it be cool if you really tapped into the actual infernal heritage part? Because typically tiefling miniatures, they all kind of have a very similar look, right? The horns all look the same. They all kind of come from the brow and kind of spin back. Sometimes we'll get like a set of ram's horns, but for the most part, they all kind of look the same, almost like they're out of the fourth edition handbook.
Right.
And no, I thought it might be a little more interesting to diversify that a bit. And so Nickey thought that was super cool and immediately jumped on board. And that's how this project kind of came to be. Along the way, in terms of like the level of responsibility and division of labor and a bunch of other stuff, there's a lot of things that you learn on your first Kickstarter that I thought would be really kind of cool to share with any aspiring creators out there. If you think that putting together a Patreon seems like a whole lot of work, and it is, just from the sculpting and design part.
Yeah.
But then there's just the less glamorous side of things, right? The business side of things, the uploading of files, all the 2D and graphic design that you have to do. If you take that from a Patreon perspective and then multiply it by at least 50, that's how much work that goes into, like, again, the less glamorous side of things for a Kickstarter. And it's not something that I think any beginning artist is probably prepared for. There's a lot of research that goes into it as well in terms of getting your pricing right, which I think we were pretty fair, but I think we could have done better on maybe the physical miniatures. But that also came with having to negotiate with different vendors, whether it was something that we wanted to fulfill ourselves and just go ahead and print out with our own printers, and then do all the fulfillment, the shipping, the tariffs, all the parcel part of it. And the answer to that was kind of a hard no, because that takes us away from putting out more miniatures, putting out more content for people.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, outsourcing something like that it's just kind of I don't want to say it's a no-brainer, but I can understand the desire to try to see if it's feasible to do that yourself, to try to give your supporters, your supporters, customers, whatever you want to call it, the most value. And I really admire that. But absolutely, from somebody who's worked in logistics a couple of times throughout their life, I understand just how much value there is in being able to go with a company that can do something and can promise a result consistently, and being willing to work with them and maybe do something at a little bit of a higher cost than what you had originally planned, to be able to have that consistent result and to be able to give your customers more one-on-one attention, or to give them more value in another area. So I definitely appreciate that way of thinking. And I know a lot of people don't quite understand that when someone works on something like this and they offer certain rewards, that they might seem a little overpriced, or they might look at some part of it and think that they don't like the way that that's working. But it isn't always the artist's choice. It isn't always the creator's choice how a certain aspect of it is handled, because they do, in order to provide the overall best response and best value to a customer, they do have to go with a third-party vendor who may have certain limitations on what they can and can't offer. So no, I totally get that, and I absolutely appreciate that.
100%. I mean, there's a lot of things that you have to factor in that unfortunately start to sneak up on you about mid project.
Yeah.
There's personally, there were a number of vendors, a number of professional painters that we hired or commissioned to go and do for this project, do work for this project that, it started to add up. But at the same time, you have to think of it as a level of marketing, because you want to give anybody at least a glimpse of the full potential of the product that you've created. Because it's one thing to go and see it rendered like this, black and gold and gray, and maybe some weird lighting that you throw on it.
Right.
But it's something completely different when somebody goes out of their way and breathes life into it with paint.
Yeah.
And I mean, that personally is one of the more engaging parts of this type of hobby, and my contribution to it is being able to start off on that at that level and then see what the community does with it, because it can change personalities very quickly depending on what color palette somebody uses. If they decide to kit bash it a bit, just adding a different base, um, there's a lot of things that go into that.
Yeah.
And so it's not something that I think a lot of people take into account, because some people have Patreons, and within those Patreons, you might have, you're using social capital where you've got people that maybe are part of your Patreon and they're avid painters, and maybe you can kind of do a little bartering there, barter and trade in order to get them to go and paint your stuff. But at the same time, being an artist and all too often being part of a project where you're paid in exposure,
Right.
or you're paid in dreams and on the back end.
Right.
It doesn't sit well with me quite as well. I'd rather make sure that somebody feels as though that their time is valued, and I try to treat anybody who I collaborate with that in mind, because I've definitely been on the other end of that short stick
Yeah.
in the past. But that being said, those things start to add up quickly. Thankfully, the Kickstarters, they only take about 10%. I say only, but it's usually about 10% in Stripe and processing fees.
Okay.
But depending on where you live, there could be taxes that are pretty sizable as well. I'm down here in Southern California, and I think I'm within a 40% tax range, because because it's like sole proprietor, and you have to go tax on yourself as well.
Right.
So by the time it's all said and done, I'm looking at whatever we pull in, 50% of it's already gone.
Oh, yeah.
So you start to add that up and try and account for maybe what your commission rate is on doing a model or a miniature for somebody, and try to make sure that anybody that's participating, in this case, both Nickey and myself, are able to at least make that back. It becomes a little bit of a challenge to walk away with some sort of monetary success rate. Right. Even though if it seems like, oh man, you guys totally funded, it's $5,000. Wow. 50% of that already gone. Now you're talking 2,500. Now you have to split that between two people. Now you're looking at 1,250.
Yeah. And for, not like, a couple hours or a couple weeks, like months worth of work, so correct. You really have to take a step back and look at it and have perspective when you look at those numbers. And, I think that's really important, because again, the general public doesn't necessarily understand how this works, and that's fine. It's not an expectation, people are going to educate themselves about the inner workings of Kickstarter. But yeah, I think that sometimes that can go a little unnoticed, and it's kind of in the back of people's minds, not really thought about whenever they look at whether something is a success or not, because there's a lot of other things in the background that you don't necessarily think about.
100%. And in this particular hobby, the price point is already really, really low when it comes to an individual model purchase, right? I mean, when you're talking about miniatures, even if you're going to a brick and mortar store, you can usually walk out of the store with a WizKids like two-piece or two-pack of miniatures for like, what, I think it's $7 now, or
yeah, I mean,
anywhere between 4 to 7.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's a really, really low profit margin, given that per miniature you're probably looking for more professional looking stuff. I've seen most artists quote like a week worth of work, even though there's definitely some artists like Nickey and even David Whitaker of Titan Troll, who can bang something out in like a day.
Yeah.
I'm probably at about 2 to 3 days now. But yeah, it's it's hard to make that back, and the only way that you do is by numbers,
Yeah.
right? By offering it a low price, and then hopefully with a larger amount of response to it, then it collectively uh, rewards your investment back. And it's not, unfortunately, I think there's also a bit of bitterness at times too, where it's just a cash grab. These guys are just doing a cash grab, and it's not really. I mean, you don't get into this for the money initially. You shouldn't, at least. And I think ultimately, as an artist, a long time ago, I had tried to make money as an artist, diving into a couple of different industries, but it never really felt right. I mean, at the end of the day, it didn't feel it felt a little disingenuous. This is the stuff that I grew up doing. This is the stuff that I love doing. It felt the most truthful to my creative process and what I enjoy making.
Yeah.
And I mean, if I could pay bills on just, people going, "Hey dude, that's cool." I'd give them all away, but unfortunately I have to pay some bills, which means I have to charge people for them.
Yeah. No, and I mean, I think it is an important reality that you have to come to eventually to decide, how much something is, essentially when it really comes down to it, and this is oversimplified, but how much are you worth? How much is your time worth? How much is your effort worth? Your skills, your experience, your training, your attitude, your determination to something. And it can be really hard. Like I have a really hard time with just, on a personal aspect, like self-worth and self-confidence, but also on a professional aspect, looking at things that I've produced, and I've only sold a few things, that I've actually made myself. And it's really hard to kind of put a value on that and understand what it's worth. And I always end up undershooting things. And, it can be a really difficult process to look at something and really take a good look at it and, decide what something is really worth. And I think that's, again, it's kind of hard for people to understand that it isn't always just an easy, like, oh yeah, I spent this much time on it, so I'll put it into this calculation and boom, I've got my answer. Like it can be, there's a lot of other factors. And I definitely understand the mental turmoil that happens whenever you try to price something that you've created.
Yeah, I mean, because you definitely want to. At the end of the day, it's the goal is to try and get it into as many tabletop sessions as possible.
Yeah,
and that's what they're supposed to be. They're avatars for this game that we all love, or these games that we all love and adore. And this is just a piece of imagination that we're able to bring to life, which unto itself is just amazing. To be able to participate in, but it's just a matter of being able to continue to do it. And at the end of the day, I think I learned a while ago that sometimes you shouldn't be afraid to just tell people what you're worth. Because you're going to get some people that go, "Ugh, are you kidding me? There's no way that's worth that much." I could go ahead and get like 50 of those for about half the price, or whatever ratio it is. But at the end of the day, you have to demand what you feel is fair, and what you're comfortable living with. I think a lot of that goes into the decision making when you're building a crowdfunding project of any scale. But you have to make sure that you throw in some contingencies. At the end of the day, you have to make sure that you're not going to be held, with a huge bill and no way to take care of it.
Yeah, and it is hard, and it's also hard, and again, I don't want to project. I was trying to think of the right word. I don't want to project too much, but I know, for me, again, like there's very few things that I, with my channel and with my current, offerings, I guess, that I would consider that I'm selling someone. But there are definitely times where someone will look at something and they'll consider that it, that's way more expensive than what it should be, or I could do something better or whatever. And it really does, you kind of question yourself for a second, like, okay, well, maybe I should. And I end up taking, I take way too much of those negative comments to heart, and then, I talk to somebody else and get a second opinion, and that can be really, really helpful. But it's hard not to kind of take those general comments that somebody might throw out and spend way more time thinking on it than you should. Because, like you said, the ultimate goal when you're creating something, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that for most people, when they're really passionate about something they're creating, your end goal is that other people enjoy it as much as possible. And making money is important, because if it's something you're trying to do to sustain yourself, to be able to do more of that, to be able to create something that more people can enjoy, or more of this thing that people can enjoy, I think that making money is important. But I think for most people, the passion comes from the idea of the end goal of someone enjoying this thing, and the money is as a secondary kind of more to just sort of sustain you. And I think that that's important. And I think a lot of people may miss that the money creation, or the money making aspect of something isn't necessarily what's most important to the artist, but it is unfortunately a necessity to be able to keep creating these things.
It is a necessary evil.
Yeah.
Certainly.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, one of the things that I didn't take into account when when we started this project was the amount of different hats that I was going to have to ultimately take. And I figured that, okay, well, maybe I can go and bring in other people and I can farm it out a bit. One example in particular was the marketing video that we had. I have a coworker that we developed a marketing video for a day job, and I was like, okay, well, editing, and maybe if I get you some assets, you can put it together, and I can go and pay you a little bit for that. Mm-hmm. And he agreed to do it about 2 months in advance of the launch of our project, and then 2 days before the launch, he said that he hadn't even touched it and won't be able to touch it for like another 2 weeks. Oh. So I was scrambling to go ahead and get stuff done. And I mean, I was already trying to go ahead and get models sculpted. I was trying to get 2D assets and graphics created, because Nickey doesn't, that's not one of Nickey's, it's not one of his strengths, or at least his admitted strengths. He feels as though he's not as confident with
right.
his 2D design and drawing and graphics. I think he's perfectly capable of it, but it's something that I went to school for and that I've trained in. So I'm kind of the more natural answer and response for that task, so that he can bang out a bunch of really cool looking sculpts. Mm-hmm. But it takes time, and so I was already kind of pressed for it, and so thankfully I was able to farm out just the rendering of it, because I knew that was going, if I did it myself, it was going to hog up my computer, which meant I couldn't do 2D design and I couldn't do sculpting. Right. So I farmed that part of it out, and then I had to go and do all the video editing, just make sure I found music. And these are things that you have to go ahead and take into account, any royalties, and making sure that you're not doing any copyright infringement. And so I went to a site called premiumbeats.com, because it's like $45, and then you gain the rights to that bit of music that you purchased rights for. So it's a relatively small investment. The artist that created it gets obviously gets compensated. And so it makes sure that everything's on the level, and they have a great selection of music. So that's where I went for my day job when it came to selecting music for that. And so it was the first choice when it came, after I started searching for something that I could find for free. And I was like, what? It's at the end of the day, we can spend a lot of time in a rabbit hole trying to find that versus just paying a little bit and getting something of quality. Yeah. So, but again, it's yet another expense that maybe you didn't necessarily think about in the beginning, that is going to factor a time investment. The I think I paid like somebody $600 to go ahead and render my, just take the files that I had and animate them in a turnaround sequence and render it and hit render on the computer for a day or two.
Yeah. So, I mean, you were essentially just renting their computer.
Pretty much, yeah. Just farming out their computer so they can go and do it.
Yeah.
So, it's definitely, it's something to take into account. If you prepare for it enough in advance, where you've got everything already modeled out, you've already got the files, you've got your physical assets for your the product that's at least the core set or whatever it is of the project. You've got that completely done. You've got any sort of 2D and graphic marketing materials that you've generated, a design aesthetic that you can agree upon. And one of the things that I wasn't quite prepared for was the limitation of Kickstarter's web or page builder. Like if you look at a lot of different Kickstarters, you can see, it looks like they've got a cool background there, but literally it's a big white field that you can maybe you can drop photos in and text and maybe some video and some hyperlinks. So that requires you, if you want it to look a certain way. I mean, there are some Kickstarters out there, like Dan Kelly's last one is like Final Fantasy inspired Kickstarter that he did. Looks great because it's all nice and bright and it's colorful and looks really, really cool. And I just didn't see the Infernals being something that should be bright and airy. So unfortunately, I had to really, really work hard at finding something that had that. This is the perfect time to show. To find something that utilized and activated that white space a bit, but still gave kind of that darker tone, that kind of hellish look, that applied some of the nuance of and world building for some of these characters. So yeah. I mean, little assets like this, creating the border treatments along here, doing the renders and the text, doing the illustrations for stretch goals. These assets right here, all of these things are generated and that I had to go ahead and draw and then digitally paint, and then assemble. In addition to sculpting, then there's managing vendors, there's managing marketing, there's paying people, there's responding to people. There's a customer service component to this. If somebody has a grievance or they're like they can't necessarily, they did something wrong or they don't understand something, it wasn't worded correctly.
Right.
That's the copy. Even just all this stuff right inside here. Greetings, adventurers. My name is. That you have to write that out and kind of put it through the ringer to make sure that it makes sense. Because you can easily confuse somebody real quickly, especially on like these support tiers. Like, well, I thought it meant this. I thought I was going to get that. You just don't want to do that. You want it to be clear, and you want the presentation to kind of convey the overall aesthetic and approach to the project, and what people can expect that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I think this is all really valuable information. And I think that the more that I do work for my channel and the more that I talk to, you and all the other artists that I've had the pleasure of getting to know and becoming friends with, the more I get to kind of peel back the curtain a little bit and see just how much goes on behind the scenes. Having conversations like this is really great because it just makes me appreciate all that much more how much work you're all doing, and seeing this kind of stuff and understanding. I mean, that's another example right in there. Printing out models and if you're going to do it yourself, printing out your models, cleaning them, making sure that they're working correctly, dealing with any kind of equipment costs and material costs, and then getting your lighting correct to get good photos of your models, and that can all be a lot of time and a lot of effort. And I think that it's really important to kind of keep track of that. And I think that people having a better understanding of what they're getting into with a Kickstarter, and that might not be your goal. Like, your goal may be, you have a good idea for what you're doing, and you've got a very, I don't want to say a small set, but you've got a very defined idea of the goals that you have and the core set that you're releasing and stuff like that, and you're working towards it, and that's awesome. But I think that getting a chance to kind of see what goes into a large Kickstarter like this, and understanding all the subtle nuances and all the behind the scenes things and some of the pitfalls you might run into, or pit fiends, ha ha ha. Anyway, but just having an idea of what you could run into, I think, is really helpful. Because, like I said, I think that there's a lot of people who are looking at Kickstarter as a little bit less, I don't want to say less stressful. And again, not being someone who's run a Kickstarter or a Patreon devoted to releasing models, I can't really say that. But I know that some people have talked about moving more to a Kickstarter type platform because they have a little bit more time to prepare something, and they're not quite under the same monthly pressure and constraints of trying to release high quality, however many models in a very short amount of time. You can have a little bit more time to prepare this stuff and kind of get it ready, and then release it whenever you have a little bit more time to prep it all and get it all looking great. But yeah, I mean, I think this is all super valuable information.
It definitely, it helps if you are, if you've networked quite a bit within the community. You can kind of see some of these pitfalls. And I'm definitely more than willing to share any of this with anybody. If I can let somebody avoid some of the mistakes that we made along the way, then I'd be more than happy to. And I think that was one of the goals that I had with our conversation today, was to try and highlight some of those things. And again, I think the one of the more important components to it is to plan ahead, and over plan. Make sure that you have more assets than far more than you think that you're going to need. Because in addition to just the Kickstarter page, you've got to go ahead and you have to have marketing materials for any social media platform. So Facebook, and they all have their own dimensions or dimension requirements. So you've got to make sure that you've got headers, you've got imagery that's going with it. You have to engage the community quite a bit. So you're doing weekly updates on several Facebook platforms, Reddit threads, Instagram, and trying to find something new to add to the conversation. So then it's also about trying to plan when you want to release imagery and information on maybe a certain part of the project, right? And find that happy medium that, again, just designing that part alone can be invaluable to a successful project. And that's something that we learned on this first one, which was, we had a substantial number of the models already done before launch, but you still want to, like, even pre-launch, you want to be able to start advertising it and showcasing part of the project probably a good month, maybe even 2 prior to the launch.
Yeah.
And that's just to go ahead and engage the community. That's to go ahead and get people to start thinking about it. There's a lot of psychology. There's a lot of strategy involved that I think if you don't participate in, and if you don't do the research ahead of time or have the knowledge of, then it's real easy to kind of not meet the potential of your project. And it's also taking a real serious, honest look at your project and trying not to make it out to be more than it is.
Yeah.
And I think when Nickey and I first started working on this project, we thought of it as being something rather small, something that we could scale up. And then before we knew it, we had 60 stretch goals that we planned out. We're like, okay, we can do that. We do that. but thankfully, because we kept it as a stretch goal, we were able to reduce the amount of overall time investment on those ideas. It was simply trying to do a little bit of world building, trying to maybe do a couple designs here and there. But ideally, if I had my druthers, as it were, I probably would have had concept art already for every stretch goal that we wanted. And I would have had marketing assets that was laid out and presented in a way that gave at least a hint of all 60, without having me to do it, without having to do an endless scroll on Kickstarter, which just the format itself, it lends itself that way. You're kind of forced to really just get people to just scroll and scroll and scroll and scroll. But if I had my way, I probably would have had that done well in advance. I would have had the marketing video done well in advance, because those are sizzle things. Those are things that you can use really quickly to give somebody a honest idea of what they can expect from your project.
Yeah.
And it's not a requirement to have a video, but it is.
Yeah.
And so those are definitely some of the things I wish I would have been able to or I wish Nickey and I were able to have been a little more successful at prior to launch.
Okay. I mean, I think that it's really important to kind of take note as you're working through something, especially because, it sounds like I've built a really great relationship with Nickey, and this sounds like something you guys would like to continue doing in the future, and possibly have other projects like this in the future. And that's awesome. And I think that taking the time to really understand what some of the difficulties you had, working through this, and kind of planning for those in the future, or like, just what you're doing here, and taking the time to try to help others avoid some of those pitfalls and some of those issues that you ran into is really, really good. And something that I really admire, taking the time to do that for others. And also, like I said, taking note of it to kind of keep an eye on it for the future. And there are some things some lessons that you can take from this and apply to Patreon, or apply to just, advertising in general, which is something that, advertising it's such a fickle creature. It's its own ridiculous thing that you have to get into, and the whole SEO thing and understanding keywords, and, it's just, there's so much to it. And every time I try to spend some time to understand it, whether it's for my channel or to help someone else, or just to understand it in general, it's just, I get like 1% more knowledge in the subject before I get burned out, and I have to let it go for a while, because it's just, the different hats that you have to wear. It's just the vast amount of different hats that you have to wear to complete a project like this, or Patreon to a lesser degree, because it's not quite as large a scale, but still, like, advertising, customer service, back of house understanding, even just creating engaging just posts in general that you're engaging with your supporters with, it can be really difficult and really daunting at times, and even just at the lowest possible end, even just spell checking what you're typing, because you're doing it at 2 a.m. and you're just trying to get this out, and then you post it, and then the next day you look at it and you're like, oh man, I missed this word, or whatever it might be. So I think, like I said, having a chance to kind of educate other people as to some of the things that they can expect when getting into a Kickstarter, and maybe how to have a little bit of a better grasp on what to prepare for, is something that I think a lot of people are really going to enjoy. And I appreciate a lot that that was your idea as to how to take this, because originally I just, I've you were one of the first people that I interviewed, and I definitely consider you to be a good friend. And I talked to Nickey for a while as well, and I think that both you guys are great, and I've loved your work for a long time. So I was super excited to help get the word out about this project and let other people know about it, and do what I could with the platform that I have, as limited as it may be, to try to help get other people involved, and just get some more eyes on this. But I appreciate that, as much as that was the goal, there was also this aspect of educating other people as well. So I really appreciate that a lot. I think that's a really admirable goal.
I mean, it's one that I'm it's one of those things that I see a lot in our community as well, right? I mean, there are a lot of people that tend to share knowledge, they share information, they share, their work. Um, you, whether it's just, a sample STL file, just to kind of say, hey, look, this is a bit of fan art. I made it for practice, or I made it just because I think it's cool, and I just want to get it in people's hands, and here you go.
Yeah.
And so you see that quite a bit in our community, and that's very, very cool. I mean, like I said, if I was able to go and do this all for free and still get the bills paid, I would gladly do it. Um, but do you want? Would you like an exclusive on perhaps what Nickey and I are doing?
Sure. Yeah.
So here's the paladin that I'm working on right now. That's not the exclusive. I just figured that I changed the screen a bit so I could look at this and find any sort of issues I want to fix real quick. But so after Infernals, Nickey and I, we definitely intend on doing more Kickstarters or crowdfunding campaigns.
Awesome.
This is just one of many heritage campaigns that we want to work on. So I'm sure there will be another iteration of Infernals, in the future. But we had easily 5 other themes that we were throwing around, and so I said, look, let's go ahead and pitch it to our community, right, or to our fans, people that are like really interested in our work, and let's find out what they want to see next. So I think we boiled it down to at least 3, but there's one in particular that Nickey is super, super stoked to do, and I don't blame him, because I think it would be super rad. One of the things that we want to work on are like beast people, or beast creatures, hybrids. Gnolls are, obviously, within that realm. Like Boarmen, rhino people. I mean, Nickey's already done. There's a rhinodon, I think it is, or it's like a half person, half rhino.
Okay. I think I've seen it.
And so he's super stoked to do more stuff like that, Tabaxi, a bunch of stuff like that. So I think we're calling it like Savage World or Savage Beast. If it's more like just a bunch of Tabaxis, I'm like, dude, you just want to make like battle ready furries, and that's okay. And I think that would be super rad.
Yeah. Yeah. Beast folk are always cool.
So that's one of the ideas that we're pitching, or that we're going to pitch. The other idea, I think, was we thought about doing celestials and elementals, or like elemental folk, like Genasi, or something of that realm. But I don't think we're ultimately going to go down that road. I think we're itching to do like some turtles and some tabaxi and some rhinodons and stuff like that. So I think that's probably where it's going to end up. But if I can do something that is super, super dynamic, then and add a different twist and spin to it, then I will.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot there to play around with. I mean, even if you're gonna come up with some things that aren't necessarily as popular, there have been some interesting iterations, on some of the more classic creatures, but the Minotaur is a really popular creature. Merfolk, really popular creature, but having some unusual hybrids is always something really cool, and I love seeing. Like, I think I saw someone did like a hippo person the other day, and I forget, it was like a commander or something, but it was really cool looking, and I was like, oh, that's cool. Like, I haven't seen that before. Coming up with cool, either a new take on a classic classically represented beast folk, or coming up with an entirely new beast folk, or even just subsets of a beast folk. Like having a tiger tabaxi, which is a little bit harder to do because you're not. It's more of a color based thing, but even just more of a sleek design. Like a cheetah, rather than doing like I've seen more lion type. Very very much stronger upper bodies, and not so much kind of sleek and cat like, because there's a huge variety when it comes to feline creatures.
Absolutely.
But yeah, I think that that's really cool, and I would love to see the particular style that comes from you and from Nickey, but specifically you guys working together. I would love to see that.
Well, it's interesting because we are what we didn't do with this particular Kickstarter that I know we both really wanted to do was a little more like lore. We wanted to do some stat blocks. We wanted to do maybe some homebrew character classes, and we ran out of time to go really develop that. And so with the next one, we're bearing that in mind, being able to make sure that we added in more time for that, so we can properly world build and offer that for players, because it's one thing to go ahead and have a miniature for your character or for the game that you're running, but it's as a DM myself, it certainly makes things a whole lot easier if you've got some content already kind of written for you.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it really depends on the type of DM that you are, but I think that having a little bit of pre-prep work done for you can save a lot of time and make you feel just a lot more confident and give you more time to devote that the mental resources to creating or putting your creative efforts into some other part of the campaign, rather than focusing on just the general world building, which is really important. But if you're the kind of DM that's willing to pick something up that's fits with your world that's already been created by someone else, then I think that that's a great idea, and it can save a lot of time, and like I said, just in general help you feel a lot more confident going into a session.
Sure. I mean, and if anything, it's a starting point, right? I mean,
Yeah.
that's definitely how I view a lot of homebrew stuff that maybe I'll use in my new games. Is it's a way of kind of filling in all the grunt work, and then or inspiration, more important, right? I mean, you can use it as a starting point to get the ideas flowing, and then you can go, okay, I kind of like what they're doing with that, but what if it had this from this other game, or this from this other system, and just kind of develop a game that is a little more attuned to your players.
Yeah.
And so that's definitely one of the things that we're going to be working on with our next project, is bearing that in mind and getting that to be part of it.
Awesome. I think that's I think that it's always really cool when I hear artists talking about how to create more value to whatever they're working on. And I think that the logical step, not that it's required by any means, but I think the logical step for a lot of artists is to work into world building and releasing stat blocks and some history, and even like lore for creatures and habitat and things like that. Like, I've heard a lot of people talk about really cool ideas for creating more depth to something. And I don't want to say than just a model, because the models are beautiful, and they take a lot of work and a lot of effort, and they are blank canvas is not the right term, but they're, for lack of a better term, they're a blank canvas for you to use to create a fantasy, and that's really cool. They're this model that you can project onto, but having some lore and stuff that comes with it to make it feel more alive is always really cool, and like I said, can be helpful for some DMs. I know myself, I usually have, between stuff that I'm doing with the channel and stuff that I'm doing, my full-time job, and then working with the family, and well, just being a dad in general.
Yeah.
My free time to get ready for a D&D session is like, I can maybe spend 2 hours a week planning. So my time is very limited, and if I can come up with the structure of a session and spend an hour doing that and spend 20 minutes less on creating lore for a creature or a world or whatever area that I'm in, and spend more time on the actual session, then I'll have that much more time to be able to devote to the aspects that are maybe not necessarily more important, but more important to me in that campaign at that moment than being able to just flip over a card and say oh, this is the creature, and these are the stats, and here's how I can run it, here's its general demeanor and its personality and things like that. So no, I think that's really cool, and I'm always appreciative when I see different content creators and artists trying to breathe a little bit more life into their releases. Which, I mean, for anyone listening, not that that's something that's required of you. It's always great. The models in general are amazing, but those little extra touches can really be are very much appreciated.
And it's also, I think it's an opportunity. Say if it's not, because there's an entire art to that, right? To building content, balanced content. You be having time to play test it. There's a that unto itself that's why there's projects and there's Kickstarter funds just for that alone. However, if you are an artist that maybe your expertise is, look, I just sculpt stuff. I'm just a drawer. Give me some pencils and I'll go ahead and draw it out. If that's your expertise, that's fine. We've got a rather large community, and this is maybe one of those times that it might be worth seeing if you can collaborate with someone. One thing to take note of, though, if you are going to collaborate with an example person, is to be upfront about any sort of compensation and any sort of breaks. One of the things that running sort of business, again, was the glamorous side of things, and probably something that a lot of, that I've heard a lot of people get in trouble with when they're doing projects like this.
Yeah,
is forgetting to worry about taxes. It's forgetting to worry about paying people a certain rate, and then before you know it, you've overspent everything. So what's worked for Nickey and I is to treat our work as though we're paid contractors. And so this way we can go ahead and pay ourselves our commission rate for the stuff that we do. And then at the end, when there's proceeds, then we can split that up with in a divisible percentage that's appropriate.
Okay.
Right. So if you've got somebody that's maybe running content, and you agree that, okay, well, maybe that's not worth as much as say sculpting, and maybe drawing isn't worth as much as sculpting, because at the end of the day, most people are looking at purchasing or getting these miniatures to go and print and use in their games. It's not to belittle anybody's work or value, but it's a matter of trying to come to a fair level of compensation. That you discuss that in the beginning and get and find a way to make sure that everybody feels as though they aren't getting the undervalued, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that it's really important to be upfront with anyone that you're working with, and really any relationship, that there's going to be any kind of financial compensation for either party. I think it's important to have that discussed and have that up front, because it's always frustrating whenever you potentially sour a friendship or even just a business relationship because of a financial issue. Like, that's always frustrating, and it's sometimes it's difficult to avoid, but I think that it takes a little bit of pre-planning, but I think that you can give yourself a pretty good chance of avoiding any kind of unpleasantness when it comes to that, just by having some basic ground rules and basic principles to follow. And I think that that's definitely something that's important to take the time to really think about and to discuss with your potential partner, to make sure that you're both on the same page and everyone can remain happy and positive with this project and moving forward. So I think that that's definitely an important thing to consider.
And, I think I haven't thankfully encountered anybody who in this community is really just out to try and take advantage of anybody.
Hmm.
And so, but that's not to say that there aren't. So, you definitely want to try and make sure that you cover your bases so that you don't fall victim to that, because unfortunately, there is, it's an interesting world that we live in.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Unfortunately, and yeah, it can be difficult. Just the staggering level of frustration that can be out there with just talking to somebody, and then you realize that they have no idea how something works, and you wonder how they got there. And then
yeah.
you're talking to them, and they're like, but can't you just? And you're like, how are you in the position that you're in if you don't know how this fundamental aspect of this thing works? And that's when they're not willing to listen to you, and they're that's when I get frustrated with them. I'm like, how do you how if you're not willing to understand this, if you're not willing to learn, like how have you gotten here? But yeah.
One of the things that we learned, or one of the decisions that we made early on, was to front load the project, and that was to offer an early bird price point for people that came in and supported or backed the project within the first 48 hours.
Oh, okay, right.
And that's that's a common practice in especially when it comes to our hobby. But in doing so, you can really expect most of, if not a majority of your backing to happen within that frame of time. And part of that, part of the challenge, and maybe even the pitfall of doing it that way, is that now you've created something that somebody who didn't have the opportunity or just learned about it after the fact, now they're going to be a little sour because they feel as though they missed out on something, or that now, I'm being taken advantage of because I don't have the same thing. And so instead of it being something that you're offering to engage people, entice them, give them incentive, and reward them for coming in early, so you can kind of go, oh, good, all that effort that we spent on this wasn't for naught, and we can actually fund the project and we can get this out there. But it is a double-edged sword in the fact that now that first 48 hours is gone, now you've got a price point that other people that are coming in may look at and see it as being unfair.
Yeah.
When in fact, that it's the other way around. It's okay. Well, this is our actual fair value, but we're giving you a discount to bring more people in earlier and at a quicker rate, and to reward people. So I would say, do a little bit of research and make sure that you not only prepare and plan for that, but that it lines up with your overall vision of the project itself. Your goal for it, and that's what you expect to gain from it, but also what you expect to present and what you want to present to your audience. So it's yet another factor and another strategy that can either hurt or help your project at large.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, just from a business standpoint, having that extra capital when you first start to devote into those unexpected bumps and those unexpected things that you have to work on, or at least knowing that you have that to kind of, no pun intended, to kind of kickstart the project, is extremely helpful. And I think that is also, it's like you said, it's a little bit of a double-edged sword, because you're offering something at a lower rate for people, and some of the people who come in after that period might think, they might look at that and think that it's what you're doing, the price that it's at now, is less worth it for them, because if you could do it at this price when you first started, well, why do I have to pay $10, $20, $15 more, whatever it might be? If you could do it for this price, then why don't you just keep doing it? But
yeah, exactly.
they don't necessarily understand that you're doing something at a very, very low cost to them, in order to kind of build up some capital to be able to move forward with the project, in a better financial standpoint, which is really important.
It's also even just the part of that puzzle to take into account when you're selecting your project funding goal. The this industry or our community is, the research that I've done, it seems the majority of even larger scale companies that are doing some of the projects, they set the project's success or the project goal in which the crowdfunding is a success and everybody gets it at $5,000. If your commission rate is $500 a miniature, that means you should only be doing 10 miniatures, but that's not it, right? And we're offering 24 miniatures. And so if our project goal is $5,000, Nickey and I don't make our commission rate, and that's before taxes, fees, everything else is out.
Yeah.
Back on that initial investment. So it's something that you still have to kind of you have to factor in, because you don't want the project to not succeed. You don't want it to not fund. Having a lower goal also allows you to market it in a way of, oh, look, it was 125% funded within the first 12 hours.
Yeah.
And that into itself becomes a marketing point and a strategy yet to build on, even though you may not necessarily make the actual initial investment back on it.
Right.
So cool things, Kickstarter does have a calculator within the building part of it that you can kind of put in your expenses, and it gives you that goal that you should be reaching, or that you should set it at, including taxes and their fees. But yeah, even in doing that, we were above that typical project success funding rate. So
Right.
we just took a gamble and said, you know what, we believe in the project. We think that it's cool. If we can get into that funding range of $5,000, even if we don't make our money back on it, this is something that we can build on, and which is what we intend on doing.
That's awesome. Yeah. I think, again, it's an important thing for people to understand, how that's a mechanic that does benefit people who feel as strongly about the project as, maybe not quite as strongly as the creators do, but feel really strongly about the project, can get involved as early as possible and save a little bit of money, but also they can at the same time help this project get off the ground and have a better chance of succeeding down the line and moving forward at a better financial position. And I think that's important to kind of remember and important to touch on. So no, I agree completely.
It's also something like, it's important to remember that, if this is your first project, remember it's your first project. That you're probably not going to do anywhere near. It's okay to make mistakes, right? You can course correct as long as you're transparent. Honesty is always the best policy, right?
Yeah.
So even if you misstep along the way, and you can course correct on the next one, realize that even if you do everything perfect, you're probably not going to meet the full potential of your project right from the gate. It's not to say that it can't happen. It's just unlikely, right? But that's okay, because this is your way to introduce yourself, your capabilities, your potential to an audience, and a way that you can build on. And that's definitely the approach that Nickey and I are taking to this, which was, we thought we had it all down. We're like, oh yeah, we can do this, we can do this. Oh, we're gonna be great. It's gonna be awesome. Everyone's gonna love it. Blah blah blah. And so then we launched it. We're like, okay, looks like some people like it, and and we're like, well, we didn't do half bad. Yeah, it's not we're getting a response. Well, I know that people like the sculpts. They like some more than others, and that's exactly how it's supposed to be.
Yeah.
And so to a certain degree, I think we've been very successful on that front. And
Good.
It lends itself to being just experience that we gain for the next one. And I would highly advise anybody who is looking to do something similar, that, just try and bear that in mind. But see, you're a human being, and you're probably going to make a mistake on the first round, and that's okay. And just prepare, learn your lesson and move on to the next one.
Yeah, Absolutely. I mean, learning and improving is an important part of any hobby, and by extension, any financial endeavor that you have with any hobby. So I think that, yeah, I very much agree. I think that anytime that you hit a pitfall with something or hit a wall with something and stumble a bit, like you try to see how you can improve upon that and avoid that particular issue in the future, or at least maybe not fall quite so hard.
Yeah.
I've definitely had those
Yeah, the
situations
goal
where
is,
it takes some time to learn from it. It can be difficult to see what how you can avoid something in the future, but I think taking some time to really understand it helps a lot.
and not being afraid to analyze it. I think, we tend to be sensitive creatures, artists. And so I think maybe criticism is all too often something that people fear. Um, my art school experience was very, very brutal when it came to critiques, and something that thankfully Nickey and I are really good at doing. In the beginning, I was real flowery with my constructive criticism with some of the stuff that people do, and vice versa.
Right.
And they were like, maybe we don't have to do that anymore. Maybe we can just cut to the chase and go, hey man, do better. Um, and that's a really good process and experience, I think, to contribute in and to not be afraid of. If you intend on getting better, you have to first hear where you're not better at, where you can improve. And sometimes it's going to be, it's just a little thing, and sometimes it's, man, that is hot garbage. You could definitely be better.
Yeah.
And take that licking and then turn around and make it better.
Yeah. It is, whether you're a creative person or I mean, I think I'm a firm believer that everyone is a creative person. They just need to find what
Agree to that? Yeah.
what their spark is that makes them want to create something. Whether it's music or any other form of art. Anyway, the point is that it's really hard to take a critical eye at what you're doing and get as much important building criticism from it as somebody else would looking at it. Maybe you're not being critical enough. Maybe you're being too critical. Maybe you're being too critical in one area, not in another. So I think having an outside perspective is usually helpful. Assuming that person is qualified to give you the criticism that you're asking for, or if it's just an outside opinion of, hey, do you like this? Always remember that people have different tastes, and somebody might say, oh, I think that's awful, I don't like that, but it might just be like, for example, my wife hates whenever media is mixed, so she can't do movies like Who Framed Roger Rabbit. She hates those kinds of movies. So, that's just an example that people have different tastes. So, there's a lot that goes into it, but I think that having structured, constructive criticism from somebody who is competent in an area that you are asking for help in is really important. Or if you're just looking to bounce ideas off of somebody, it can be really scary. And make sure you set expectations with that person, and let them know, hey, I'm be gentle with your criticism, but this is what I'm looking for, just to kind of have that idea, going out of whatever you're working on. Yeah, I think that having a feedback loop from somebody, or not necessarily feedback loop, but being able to bounce ideas off of somebody and being able to bounce these projects off of someone and see what they think about them is really, really helpful for building your skill in any hobby.
It's invaluable. I mean, it's something that I see introduced and requested and suggested in just gaming, right? If you're going to run a game, make sure you communicate with your players. What kind of game do they want to play? What are things that what are their, I have to use the term, but what are their triggers? What are the things that they just can't handle whatsoever? Do not put that in the game.
Yeah.
It's good to gauge your players in the same way. If you're not interested in just raw response, then don't be afraid to say, what? Again, like you said, don't be gentle. Be gentle. This is my first time. I'm more sensitive. I poured a lot of time into it, but is there something that I can improve upon?
Yeah.
I actually, I did the exact opposite to the point where I feel like maybe I don't think I'm sadistic, but maybe with all the martial arts that I've done for 35 years, maybe a little sadistic. I actually loomed in the background of a Discord channel and just watched people roast my project.
Oh,
Um, all the stuff they were just like, oh, the design is awful. Look at that. His font is all over the place and just tearing my our Kickstarter apart. And I did it honestly. I didn't want to interject and say, well, this is why we did that. And this is, I wanted honest feedback. They could be as brutal as they want. I didn't care. They were, I was looking for valid feedback, on unabashed and honest feedback, and I got that, and then some.
I mean, yeah, being on, I mean, the internet in general will always give you the most brutally honest feedback, and then even further than that. Um, but especially so if you're inside of a group that's talking about your project without them necessarily knowing that you're there, or not making your presence known, in a public forum space like that. I've definitely been in that situation, and it's always interesting. And it's I more power to you if that's how you take that criticism and you learn from that, and you learn how to improve, and you hear the points of valid criticism amongst just the general dislike for whatever the project might be in this area, that area. I think that's important. And one of the most constant criticisms, I wouldn't say constant, it's about every 3 or 4 videos, someone will say, and they'll give a timestamp and say, at this point, that's when the original poster, or whatever they want to call me at that point, this is when they get to the point. And, I'll look at that, and I look at it and I'm like, okay, like the timestamp, that's really weird. Like, you're starting right at this point. And I think that everything that I'm giving is of value up until that point, but it's their own perspective, what they're bringing into this and what they're looking for from my video. They're coming into it and saying, well, I only needed to learn how to do this one very specific thing, and you talked about these 2 other things before you got to this thing that I needed. And it's helped a lot to understand that everyone comes to one of my videos, or whatever project I'm working on, with a different goal in mind and a different need. And I'm never going to be able to in one video satisfy everything somebody's looking for on a topic. And I just have to accept that some people are going to be frustrated because and part of it's on me if I don't put timestamps in my videos to let people be able to get to something faster. But understanding that people coming to a video, I'm never going to be able to put everything in there that everybody needs. It's just part of life, and some people are going to be mad that they have to watch through a 6, 7, 10-minute video to find what they're looking for, and they're going to be upset about that, and then they're going to talk about it.
Imagine how long the video would be if you tried to go and get something for everybody.
Oh, seriously.
So yeah,
yeah.
That's the other part, is just realizing that you're not going to be able to please everybody, and remembering that with any project that you do.
Welcome to why you shouldn't be an artist.
Hopefully it didn't come up actually.
But I mean,
I've had plenty of friends who say, Mike, you're an artist, talk to my kid and tell them what they need to do to be an artist. I'm like, okay, the first bit of advice.
Yeah. There's a lot of misconceptions out there, and I think having open, honest conversations to people who want to hear it, I think it's important. There's always going to be people who are, they have their own opinions, and trying to change their mind just isn't worth it, and it's fine. People, they have their mind made up, and that's fine. But I think that having open, honest conversations about what's going on behind the scenes, I think, is really important, and I think that's. Like I said, I think that's whenever you had mentioned your idea for how to take this interview, I really appreciated that a lot, because I think that having that kind of open conversation about what's going on behind the scenes with a Kickstarter, I think, is really important, and will be of value to a lot of people that are trying to get into Kickstarters, but also maybe some people who tend to purchase Kickstarters a lot that might be interested to hear what's going on with all these things that they're excited about getting, and maybe they'll understand a little bit more some of the more nuances that are going on behind the scenes.
Yeah, hopefully it's not one of those things where it turns them off. They're like, oh gosh, this artist is whining again about how this isn't big enough, and it's definitely not what I hope to convey. But I think it's valuable information for I think anybody who's a fan of anything. Whether you're watching the making of an animated project, or a movie. There's a lot of resources that are thrown at a lot of these pretty big projects, and I think it throws a little bit of levity on it, and information is invaluable. The more you know about it, the more you know. Um, I think the more people they have more ammunition to make a sound decision, and I'm thinking all for that. Whether it's something that you're on the fence about whether or not you want to go and take on a project like this for yourself, um, maybe you have far less time than I did. This at least gives you the information that you needed to decide that, oh, well, I thought it was going to be a whole lot easier. It's going to be work. It's going to be a lot of work.
Yeah.
And it's not to say that it's not rewarding work, but it's going to be a lot of work. So just make sure that in order to combat that you plan ahead, plan it well in advance. I've seen some Kickstarters where people took 3 years to go out.
Wow.
And if that's, and they're making entire games as well as assets and doing play testing and a bunch of other stuff.
That makes sense.
So they're able to kind of, and that's on one part. And then there's some people, there's one particular, I think, that did some retro looking spacecraft and rockets. I think they were working on that for 3 years, over 3 years, and they were doing like physical moves. And they started getting into 3D printing, so you could go and do bits and create your own retro space rocket. But I think they worked on that thing for 3 years, and it was super successful, or at least it seemed to be. I hope that they were able to make that one of the investment that they had. But,
yeah, absolutely.
It's definitely a really cool project. But yeah, it's not unheard of. I would say that you're probably better off holding off launching your project, engaging the community. One of the things that Nickey and I didn't realize was going to happen was that at the launch of Infernal Heroes, that Archvillain Studios put out like a Speak with the Devil for their Patreon that month. That Casting Play had done their Something Hells
right.
release. Right before that, there's a good 3 or 4 other Patreons that had hell themed or demon themed releases. Not to mention Kickstarters that were doing things that were also hell themed.
Right.
So that's a good thing to you want to make sure that you're engaged and you have the finger on the pulse of projects that are coming out, so that you don't have a collide. Or that you don't oversaturate the market with something that's similar to the point where, maybe you have less resources to throw at it than this other thing does. And even though yours is different, your project is a bit different. Like ours is, I think the difference and maybe the positive spin was that these are, for all intents and purposes, tieflings. They are hellbound or born from either contracts or maybe from actual parentage. But at the end of the day, they are tieflings that they're supposed to represent the tiefling character that you would use in a D&D game or campaign.
Right.
But
yeah.
they're vague enough to maybe you can apply a proxy-based game as a minion or a soldier or an assassin or what have you.
Yeah.
But had we known, I would have probably pushed it out just a little bit longer.
Yeah.
To avoid that pitfall. But you also don't want to do the opposite of that, right? Where you delay it inevitably to where it comes out well after the interest in it has expired, because you've been putting a little bits of it. Yeah, I'm working on this cool thing, and then you've been working on this cool thing for like 5 years, and you're like, this again, and then it finally comes out, you're like,
Yeah, no, I mean, it is definitely a balancing act, and like I said, having more information is only going to be helpful. But I think that this has been an awesome chance to get to see more of this project and get to, it's always a pleasure chatting with you. But I really appreciate you taking the time, like I said, to kind of give people a better understanding of what what it means to have a Kickstarter, to plan for it, to how to avoid some of the issues that can come up, and in general try to be a little bit better prepared for it, in the hopes that you can get a better experience out of it, and therefore give a better experience to your supporters. I think that that's really important. So I definitely really appreciate you taking the time, and I'm definitely going to be keeping up with this one, and certainly I hope that anybody watching, anyone listening to this, please go take a look at the Kickstarter. It'll be linked down below, and both of the both Michael's Patreon and Nickey's Hatchery will be linked down below, and I encourage you to take a look at that as well, because it's all really amazing stuff. But all right, well, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it, and yeah, I'll definitely be talking to you more soon.
Absolutely.